Yes, there was oil, but it evaporated. Our scientists were able to ascertain that oil could have been cooked in the Mwitanzige area and that there were rocks that could store the petroleum. I must really salute these people because they were so confident. Because you know my methods of work, I always interrogate them. And they were very sure. They said, we are sure that there is oil here. There are other details which they gave me which I don't want to go into now. The issue that remained was to drill and confirm this or otherwise. That is when our Minister of Energy advertised in search for oil companies who could come up with the risk capital to use in drilling to confirm whether the oil is there or otherwise. So, you can see the 4 stages. Aeromagnetic survey, use an aircraft, there are machines there which can detect. There's called what they call gravity survey. I don't know what that one is. There's another one they call seismological survey. Seismological survey is like when a doctor puts a stethoscope on your chest and hears what's happening inside you. So all these 3 were done by our scientists. But there was the 4th step, drilling. To drill physically, to confirm. And that's where they advertised and they got companies to come. The following companies came in. Fina Exploration, it was registered in March 1991. Uganda General Works and Engineering, 1995, February. Heritage Oil and Gas, January 1997. Hardman Resources, January 1997. Hardman Resources, another one, October 2001. Heritage and Oil Gas. These are different blocks. I'm not reading the blocks, because some of them got 2 blocks. Some of them got more than 1 block. They are here. EA3, EA2, EA2. So you could get 2. You could get 1 company getting 2 blocks. Heritage and Gas Limited Energy, Africa, July 2004. Block EA1. Heritage Oil and Gas Limited and Energy Africa, September 2004. EA Block EA3A. Neptune Petroleum, September, Block EA5. Dominion, Uganda, July 2000, Block EA4B. We therefore must salute our scientists who did all this work. The first well sunk by Heritage in Semliki in the year 2003 was a disappointment. It contained a lot of carbon dioxide. The Europeans of Heritage panicked. I even myself almost panicked. Because these Europeans had told me this is a huge oil field. So when they found there was carbon dioxide there, they panicked. So, oh, maybe the whole Mwitanzige area has got carbon dioxide. And they closed the well and ran away. Because carbon dioxide is very dangerous. You know, it can suffocate you and many people can die. You remember carbon dioxide is not oxygen. I think you remember that. That little chemistry. Our scientists were resolute and insisted that there was oil. Even now, they insist that there may be oil even in that same leak well, carbon dioxide notwithstanding. I remember I had a big debate with these white people and with my scientists. The scientists were saying, you know, there is oil. These people are deceiving us. Carbon dioxide may be there, but there is oil. But anyway, this was the Semlik well. So what they did was to move north from Semliki and started drilling in the other oil fields. The first productive well was struck on the 6th of January 2006 by Hardman Resources at Mputa oil field in Hoima district. Since that time, out of 64 wells drilled, 58 have found oil, which is a 90% success rate. It is estimated that having explored in only 40% of the potential area, we have confirmed 2.5 billion barrels, and yet we have only explored in 40% of the area. Exploration in all the other areas will be done when licenses are awarded through competitive bidding once the Petroleum Resource Management legislation is enacted. These other areas have not been given out. Some years ago, about 3-4 years ago, we took a decision that now that we have the oil, we don't have to beg anymore. Because you see, at the beginning you were begging, please come and see whether there is oil here. Now that we have the oil, we don't have to beg. That's why we are saying, you come here by competition. There's a long list. They normally come to me. So we would like to do this, we would like to. You go and compete when the time comes. That's what we have been telling them. I think the last time I checked, there was something like 28 companies waiting to compete. And they have been waiting for the last 2 years, you know, checking. And we have been telling them, no, wait for the law. Now that we know that we have the oil, there's no need for panic. You come and compete with the others. When the first successful well produced oil, discussion started on the way forward. There were attempts to tell me that Uganda should quickly agree to a pipeline for export of crude oil. I said, how about a refinery to produce petrol for use in Uganda, diesel, kerosene, heavy fuel oil, and other byproducts. Some people try to tell me that refineries do not make money. In fact, we even had a seminar. You know, this reading African countries is really a struggle. We had a seminar in Munyonyo, and everybody was lecturing. Said, no need for refinery. But why? People build refineries. Why do they build them? I couldn't be convinced. My question then was, why do those who build refineries build them? Are they Mother Teresa's working for philanthropy? They could not answer this. When I visited Iran in May 2009, I asked the president there whether they had refineries in Iran and why. He said they had 9 refineries and they were building another 7. Yet here we were being discouraged from building even one, just one, a chair, as we say in our language. Refinery, a chair. That's what we are being told. Unbelievable. Eventually, our people hired a group known as Foster Wheeler, which said that the refinery project is very profitable in Uganda, And it has an NPV. NPV, you remember, NRM caucus, we were talking about this NPV, net present value, that measurement of US dollars 3.2 billion at 10% discount rate, and an internal rate of return of 33%. Foster Wheeler also found that a pipeline for exporting crude oil alone would have an NPV, net present value, of US dollars 0 at 10% discount rate and an internal rate of return of 10%. In other words, a pipeline would be much less profitable than a refinery, partly because our crude oil is waxy and needs to be heated all the way to Mombasa. Right from the exploration period, our officials had reached agreements with the oil companies concerning what are called production sharing agreements, PSAs. The logic here is that the host country, in this case Uganda, the country which is owning the oil, either does not have money, or if she has the money, she's not willing to risk it in drilling to confirm the existing of the oil, which may not be there or may be there in smaller quantities that are not economic. You see, Uganda started at a much higher level. Really, those who are fond of talking, they should be a bit humble and understand what smaller people, humble, can do. Uganda started at a much higher level. All these African countries, I doubt very much, I have not done any research, I don't think many of them which found oil, that oil was found by their own people. In all cases, I suspect, we can do research in this, I suspect the oil was found by the oil companies from beginning to end. But in our case, out of the 4 stages, the oil companies came to do only one. So when you are talking about oil, you should know that you are talking with really very knowledgeable people. In fact, my problem is to retain them. Many of them have already been stolen to work for others abroad. These people whom we trained, they have already been stolen because they are not, we don't pay them as highly as these other people are paying them. So please, you may be very, very clever, very what, but please know that there are people who may be cleverer than you. It's just good precaution. It's always safe to say, I'm very clever, but there could be 1 or 2 people who may be slightly cleverer than me. It's a good precaution, because you may get into problems. You think you are very clever, but in fact, you don't know anything. Very risky. So these people, the logic here is that in our case, we knew there was oil. Remember, our scientists had said the oil may be there by the use of the other methods I told you, aeromagnetic survey, gravity survey, seismology, but they had not drilled to confirm their suspicion. The oil companies specialize in this aspect of the business. They put forward their money to drill the wells for the better or for the worse, as we say in Christian marriages. You know what we say? We say, for better or for worse, let's just go. If the oil is found, these oil companies specialize in that. They say if oil is found, they share in the oil until they recover what they put in, and thereafter they continue to take a smaller share in recognition for their initial investment. In our case, the PSAs our people signed go as follows in summary. Number one, an agreed exploration work program and a budget to execute the work. In other words, the government obligates oil companies to drill a number of wells or carry out surveys over a specified area and within a defined time frame. This helps to monitor the exploration work and monitor expenditure. Number two, an obligation to return part of the licensed area called relinquishment on renewal of the exploration period. If you explore, because they give you a block for a certain time, if you don't find the oil in that time and you want to apply for a renewal, then you must relinquish part of the area they had given you. So the production sharing agreement is quite detailed. Government is entitled to royalty on gross production when the production starts. Government is also entitled to a participating interest or share of the national oil company, which is paid for initially by the licensed oil companies. An allowance, number 5, an allowance for companies to recover the verified investment cost, which recovery is capped at no more than 60% of gross oil production after deduction of royalties. This means that the costs to be recovered by the oil companies have to be verified as bona fide expenditure. Secondly, unlike other businesses where companies recover their costs from all revenues generated up to 100%, in the oil business, the companies are allowed to recover up to 60% annually in order to allow for some of the oil to remain for the government to take their share early when the oil has been found. The oil that remains after the recovery of the cost is called profit oil. Number 6, production sharing of profit oil for both government and the oil companies. Number 7, taxation of the licensee's profit oil. The licensee is the one who is licensed to do the oil exploration and production. Before the recovery of their costs, the oil companies, that is when the oil has been found, and we start digging it out. Before the companies have recovered their costs, the oil companies will be taking 74 barrels out of every 100 barrels produced. 74 barrels out of every 100 barrels produced. After the recovery of their costs, the oil companies will take 42 barrels out of every 100 barrels produced. But this is just sharing the barrels. This is sharing the barrels. We have dug out, before the company, before we have recovered our costs, which we put in, we dig out 100 barrels. We take, the company takes 74, the government takes 26 barrels. After the company has recovered the money they put in, then the company takes 42 barrels and the government takes 58 barrels. But that's the beginning. That's the beginning. This is just sharing the barrels produced. It does not include taxes, which are 30% of barrels taken by the companies, and does not include royalties, which are 5%, and does not include royalties are 5% up to 12.5% of the gross production before cost recovery. It also does not include equity by the state oil company, which would also earn dividends of 15% out of the joint venture with international oil companies. So, two scenarios. Before the companies have recovered the money they put in to dig, they used to dig, they take 74 barrels out of 100 barrels. The government takes 26. When the oil costs are finished, they are recovered. The oil company takes 42 barrels out of 100. The government takes 58. But after that, the government taxes the barrels which were taken by the company. So out of your barrels, I tax you 30%. 30% of his barrels. Of the 74 or 42, whatever, because it varies. Not only that, the government takes royalties between 5% and 12.5%. The difference comes when the oil produces small, the royalty of the government is 5%. When the oil being produced is big, the royalty of the government can go up to 12.5%. So the royalties go from 5 to 12.5%. Then, in the business of the oil company, the government automatically gets 15% of shares. 15% of shares. So, we share the barrels. First we share, and I take back to my house. It is like landlords in some of these places. You can imagine a landlord where a tenant produces 100 kilograms of maize. And the landlord takes 26 kilograms so that the tenant remains with 76 kilograms. At the beginning. Then afterwards, I come back and I tax your 74 kilograms, 30%, me the landlord. Then I also take royalty, 5 or 12%, depending on the amount. And then I say, by the way, that business you are carrying out on my land, I also have a share there, or 15%. So, what does this mean? This was negotiated by these people, by officials. In fact, at this time, I was not so much involved. But when I came, I could see that they had done a good job. If you include the tax, the royalties, and the dividends, and assuming you are producing at 200,000 barrels per day, the total government share will be equivalent to 152,326 barrels out of every 200,000. we now start producing at 200,000. If you total the share of the government barrels, the taxes, the royalty, the shareholding, out of the 200,000 barrels, the government will take 152,000 something. This is 76.2%. Now, these were the first agreements. These were the first agreements. When we didn't know there was oil, we were just Kupaza says, over, maybe. So these were the first agreements. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the worst case scenario, which were signed first by our people. These agreements were signed before there was certainty that there was indeed oil. Our people could not have attracted those oil companies without these types of agreements. Now that it is confirmed that we have the oil, we shall be able to negotiate for higher government shares from the beginning, because now we are sure. So although I was not involved at this stage so much, because after I send them for training, I more or less forget about this. But later on, when I came to check, I could see they had done a good job. Because how do you attract this man to come in the house? How do you attract them? These were they negotiated, I think, reasonable agreements. Now, these were agreements